Could Elon Musk help save Ireland? It's no secret, in fact, it's a hard and fast reality that we Irish, the Irish in Ireland, are being fast-tracked into oblivion. We are being replaced in our own land. We are being, in my opinion, colonised and soft genocided. We will, in just a few years, because of open borders and government-sponsored mass immigration, be a minority in our own homeland. We will, in a very few short years, if current trends continue, cease to be a unique and distinct people in the world. And it's being cheerleaded on by the EU, who hates any sense or form of nationalism and nationality, and by our own spineless politicians, who are little more than nodding lapdogs for the EU elites in Brussels. It has been said that demographics is destiny. But I would also say this: demographics is a numbers game. It's just numbers. And with the Irish, at least all through my life growing up until a few years ago, we were sitting around 4 million as a population. Well, 4 million in world terms, in country terms, in nation terms is a drop in the ocean. It's tiny. You can't play fast and loose with a tiny population if you care about your culture, your heritage, your history, your ancestry. But that is exactly what our political leaders decided to do. Why? They thought they could make more money that way. The EU promised our dim-witted politicians that the open borders road was paved with gold. But here's the kicker. What they didn't tell them was it's also paved with cultural tribal extinction. If only a couple of suburbs of Stuttgart or Marseille decided to up sticks and move to the Emerald Isle, well, we'd very quickly find ourselves speaking German or French. Any of us who raised even the slightest concerns about this radical new policy, new way forward for Europe at the time were dismissed as cranks and tinfoil hat conspiracists. It couldn't possibly go wrong, we were told. Why, only a few tens of thousands of people might possibly move our way. This is what our leaders told us. Well, the truth is they didn't know, and I believe they didn't really care. I happen to believe the whole open borders plan project within the EU was just a way of acclimatizing the populace to this new idea, this new notion that you could just have a borderless state, a borderless empire. But really, it was softening the public up for a bigger project, for an even bigger plan, which was the idea of open borders to the whole world. So it starts with Europe, you get used to that, that starts to become normalized, and then suddenly it's widened and broadened out, and suddenly you have people from Mongolia, the Congo, and Vanuatu, all just romping in with no papers, no passports, no visas, and no vetting. It is perfectly clear to me, and to, I think, many, if not most other people, that this experiment in Irish terms, in terms of Ireland and its tiny indigenous native population, has been a disaster. It's now, the floodgates have well and truly opened, the dam has burst. We are seeing demographic changes on a scale we've never seen before, and at a speed that we've never even imagined possible. But it is possible, and it is happening. And even though the vast majority of Irish people, when polled in numerous polls, have said they're against what's happening, they want this mass immigration situation either stopped or at least slowed down until we can get a firm handle, a grip on what's going on, the government and all the main political parties simply refuse to do it. They want nothing to do with this notion of slowing or stopping this tide, this tsunami of people flooding into Ireland from all corners of the globe.
Let there be no doubt about where Ireland stands. We want nothing to do with a backward-looking idea of sovereignty.
And though I have spoken about this topic numerous times on this channel, I get constant and regular comments in the comment section from many people, and I appreciate all the comments and every comment, even the ones totally disagreeing with what I say. That is your prerogative, and I'm glad you comment. But I have seen comment after comment after comment saying, you voted for these people, you get what you deserve. You vote for these parties and they come back in and you get more of the same. It's your fault, it's the voters' fault, it's the Irish people's fault. And I say, yes, okay, yes, you're right there. You're right to a degree. But people vote for Kim Jong-un 99.9% of the time. And he romps in every time. I don't think the North Korean people deserve him. You could also argue Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, a hard leftist socialist guy, communistic guy. Some would say a dictator. I don't know about that. But he's voted in too. And he then unleashes his regime on the people. You could say, well, the Venezuelans voted for him, so they deserve him. And you could go on and on. Fidel Castro was voted in. Communists had elections all the time, but you always got the communists, because there was only communists. But they were elections and people voted for them. Well, you voted for communists. You deserve the communists. Now, I know full well I'm being hyperbolic here. I'm doing it purposely. I'm being deliberate in that, to highlight the point that Ireland has a veneer of being a democratic, free and open society. It is not. No, it's very carefully curated, it's very carefully controlled, it's very carefully herded into the pen. What I mean by that is simply this. And here, at last, says you, is where Elon Musk comes into the frame. You see, most people consume mainstream media. I know, shock horror to all my esteemed and beloved viewers and commenters, we are not the majority. We are a tiny minority. Most people in Ireland, and indeed in the West, still consume mainstream media. That is your television, your radio stations, your newspapers, your glossy magazines. That's the reality. That's it. It's just like that. Every poll you can look at will tell you exactly the same thing. It is changing, yes, and it will change. And eventually, most people will be over here with us. But right here, right now, that is not the case, and not by a long shot. I choose to live in the world as it is, not as I would like it to be. And people sometimes ask, well, why don't people like me or somebody else, and YouTube is people far better and bigger than me, why don't you all run for election? I'll tell you why. Because YouTube views and clicks don't translate to votes. Maybe someday, but not right now. It's not a thing. Unless you go super duper duper viral, it's not gonna happen. YouTube is not the wider world. The wider world, for better or worse, is the mainstream media. It's your television. It's your newspapers. And in Ireland, that world is carefully, very carefully maintained, curated, and controlled. The mainstream media, television, newspapers, the radio, is all under the careful control and curation of the government. The broadcast mainstream media in Ireland need licenses from the government to operate. And if you need a license from the government to operate, then I'm sorry, but they own you. You want to know where votes come from? They come from RTE, the state broadcaster. I hate to say it, but that's the truth. Do you know where votes come from? They come from the Irish Times and the Irish Independent newspapers. That's where they come from. Not YouTube and not X. At least not yet. And I would argue that the reason most people, and we're talking predominantly about people, the older generation, 40 up, because younger generation are too busy with TikToks and Instagrams. I'm talking about the older generation, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s and up, who vote, who actually vote. They get all their information, all their news, all their opinions fed to them by the mainstream media, by government propaganda. Why do you think the Irish government was quite happy, more than happy, to pump in over 700 million euros to prop up the dysfunctional RTE, Radio Television state broadcaster? Because it's the mouthpiece of the regime. Why do you think they were happy to throw tax incentives at all the mainstream newspapers and newsprint and magazines? Why? Well, because they were getting them on board. The people who vote in these parties vote based on the information they get from government-controlled media. Irish people vote the way they do not because they're uninformed, but because they're misinformed, and purposely so. The government-owned state broadcaster only ever gives specific sides of stories, only ever puts out specific narratives that suit the government, regardless of what most ordinary Irish people think. Its job is not to inform, but to propagandise, to message, to create narratives that suit the ruling elite. Well, fair enough, you might say. That's the state broadcaster and you're going to get a bit of that. What about the rest of the mainstream media landscape? Well, I'm afraid the picture doesn't really get much better, because the vast majority of the rest of the mainstream media, I'm talking about the other TV station, I'm talking about the other radio stations, I'm talking about not only the national ones but the regional ones, well, they're all owned by just a small handful of global corporations. Firstly, there's Media House. It's a Belgian conglomerate, and they own a number of national newspapers, including the Irish Independent, the Sunday Independent, the Evening Herald and the Sunday World, as well as they have a 50% stake in the Irish Daily Star. They also control regional titles such as the Belfast Telegraph and a dozen weekly papers. They are the largest print media group in Ireland, and they have, as you can see, very extensive coverage. Then, of course, there's the old reliable Irish Times, which is our version of the Guardian over here, the ultra uber woke newspaper read mainly by the academics and elites. They consistently push out every and any woke agenda they can possibly think of. As far as I'm concerned, they're rarely, if ever, batting on the side of the ordinary Irish people. Apart from that, you have Bauer Media Group, and they're German. They own quite a number of radio stations, national and regional, including Today FM, News Talk, and regional stations like Dublin's 98 FM, Spin 1038, and Cork's Red FM. Just these radio stations account for over 25% of the total radio market in Ireland. Again, a foreign-owned conglomerate. Then there's Virgin Media, and they are the, if you like, television alternative to the government's RTE. They own Virgin TV, and they are the largest commercial TV operator in Ireland. So you see the problem here. We have, on the one hand, the government controlling the main source of information with its state broadcaster, and then you have a small number of conglomerates, foreign conglomerates, multinationals, who control the vast majority of the rest of the commercial print media, TV and radio media. So apart from the government having no real interest in the Irish as a distinct people, a unique people, and trying to preserve that, well, I would imagine that these foreign conglomerates have even less interest in that concept. So who's actually on the side of the ordinary native Irish person, you might ask? Well, very few people in terms of media. Gript Media being the main one that I can think of, and they're an online platform, and they just simply don't have the reach, even though they're doing sterling work. And there are many content creators, again, on YouTube, such as myself, and far more worthy people than me, who are giving voice to the ordinary Irish sentiment, but we don't have the reach. There is no way we can compete with the juggernaut that is the government, state broadcasters, and these major media conglomerates. So what's my answer? What's a possible solution to this? Well, here's where Elon Musk comes in. Elon has proved to me and many others that he is a firm believer, first of all, in free speech. His takeover of Twitter, now X, has been a revelation in allowing freedom of expression and difference of opinions. Elon is also a firm believer in unique peoples being allowed to be unique peoples, and has a firm interest in them remaining as unique peoples in the world. He is, from what I can tell, a patriotic man, and he believes in the importance of borders and structural integrity of countries and nations. Elon, if you're listening, why don't you take a stake in some of the main players? You don't need many, they're all condensed. Maybe take a stake, a controlling stake in Virgin Media, in the TV station. The word is they're losing money as it is. They'd probably sell it to you for a couple of quid and a packet of crisps. Then you could turf out all the lackeys and the sycophants, get rid of all them, put in true Irish patriots, and give the other side of the argument. Maybe take a controlling interest in the Irish Independent newspaper. That'd be a good one. That way you could again turf out all the lackeys and sycophants and the journalists who just wait by the phone for a government minister to call them to come and be an advisor. All those heads could be turfed out, got rid of. Bring in real journalists, people who aren't part of the club, part of the clique, part of the government spin machine. Get real people in there. I guarantee you, you'd double your circulation if you started giving Irish people the real story, the unvarnished truth about what's really going on. For a man of your extensive means, this would only be a trifling sum, and you might give the ordinary Irish people the voice in the mainstream media that they so dearly crave and that they so dearly need. You could help turn the tables. You could help even the odds against our own corrupt political class and their paymasters, the European Union and the global corporations. You could be the champion of every Irish patriotic man and woman here. You could help lead the charge for our salvation. You could help save Ireland.